I was elected in 1995, started serving in 1996 as Chancery Clerk. The then board came with me and said, we've got to have a county administrator. A part of being a county administrator was having the Emergency Operations Center employees report to that county administrator. So that's kind of what put me in the position that I'm going to speak to you about today. I try to cover this for about 10 days to just kind of help you understand from behind the scenes some things we were dealing with. So I'll start it off. Funny, we were mentioning it a while ago and it came up about Friday afternoon. And I'll always remember that. We'd had so many close scares and we'd get called to the Emergency Operations Center and we'd go over there. And I'd always go over in the afternoon and I'd try to come back to the courthouse. And I can remember that day I came back and all the ladies were there wide-eyed and said, what you think? And I said, this is the one we've been dreading. You know, y'all need to go on home and you need to prepare. So their question was, do we need to start putting things up on the countertops? I said, y'all go take care of your situation. We'll worry about that tomorrow. So we were studying the situation that on the Friday afternoon, realizing that we probably were in trouble. So that afternoon we looked at it and said, what would it hurt to do a voluntary evacuation? Well, nothing. So let's go ahead and put a voluntary evacuation out. Now, unfortunately, we'd put out voluntary evacuations for so many of the other ones leading up to this. A lot of people listened to that and said, let that go. So Saturday morning, we reported to the Emergency Operations Center in the meeting. Everything was pointing toward us. Katrina was in the Gulf. It was strengthening. Every model was showing it was coming in on us. So we basically started the process. Now, what can we do to prevent? What can we do to prepare for it? So we got trustees, we got buildings and grounds people, we got road department workers, and we went to all the county buildings and started trying to do just like y'all did personally with your homes. Started trying to board up windows. We started trying to get all the computers, printers, everything up on the countertops. Thought we were doing some good. So that was a big thing we were working on. So everybody was going at it and at least giving it our best effort. So we did that most of the day. Got back into the Emergency Operations Center that afternoon, and that's when all the people started coming in. FEMA started coming in. NEMA started coming in. Military started coming in, and they are all coming in to meet with us. So when I talk about meeting with us, I'm talking about the mayor of Bay St. Louis at that time, Eddie Favre, mayor of Waveland at that time, Tommy Longo, supervisors, the EOC director, and I was involved with that as well. So we would all get in a meeting and we would try to make our decisions as to what was going to be best for not only the people there, but for the county. So the FEMA director came in, he'd walked around the building, he came back, he had all the information, and he sat in front of us in that Saturday afternoon meeting. He said, I'd like to ask y'all to do one thing, okay? Rethink staying here at this Emergency Operations Center. Now let me stop and pause and tell you right what we were dealing with. 1998 or 1999, the county had bought the building from the McDonald's out on Highway 90 and Ullman Avenue. A lot of you would remember it, lived around here for years. I think it was a bowling alley at one time. It was a parts store or building supply store at one time. The county had bought it, made two county courthouses out of it, the Justice Court and the Chancery Court, made an Emergency Operations Center with a big conference room. Luckily, and you'll find out as we get into this, we housed the Hancock County Food Pantry in it, built a big walk-in cooler in the back of it. So we were there, and they were saying, you need to rethink this. We had a big conference room set up, had some 20 phone lines set up around it, had tables, had all the dry erase boards, TVs, we had everything. We were prepared now, we were ready. So he looked it around and said, I'd like to ask y'all to rethink this. Y'all need to leave this area and go north. You got to get north of the interstate because I'm looking at some models that's not going to be favorable here. Bay St. Louis was there and they quickly walked around, looked around and said, we can't leave our people. Now, my question to them, we've already put out an evacuation. So at that time we'd put out the mandatory evacuation and trying to get it out, TVs, radios, everything else. Bay St. Louis said, we got emergency people, we had law enforcement, we got fire department, they can't leave. So Bay St. Louis quickly made the decision, we got to stay. Waveland, after a short talk, said, we got to stay. So as I looked around the room and I said, what are our choices? We don't have any other place to go. I mean, we can't go to the arena. It's wide open up north of the interstate. We've got a facility up there, county barn. There's no room up there. We don't have a place to put the phone lines. You know, we don't have any choice. So we settled after a little while and thought, we're going to stay. So FEMA, military, MEMA said, we think you're making a mistake. So, well, we don't have a whole lot of choice. So the decision was made we were going to stay. So we dug in as the evening started to go. We were getting out the mandatory evacuation, asking everybody to leave. Phone lines were lit up. When I'm telling you, we had 20 phone lines, and we probably had that many people manning them. Most of the calls were coming in, where do I get sandbags? Where do I go to, where do I get these supplies? And everybody, and we told them, when they call, ask them not to worry about sandbags, leave. We need them to get out of here. But people were calling the sandbags. So as it rocked on that Saturday, that's when they started gathering those sandbags, and we knew that that probably was not good, even though we were asking them, please get out of here, please leave. Sunday I got up, and I never will forget, looked at the TV, went home that night, got up that next morning early, looked at the TV, everything was pointing right at us. And I said, all right, may not be good. So I went in, and I never will forget, I packed 5 sets of clothes, underwear, clothes, just that I needed. Got me a little bedroll, got me a pillow, and away I went. So I went down and thought, I won't ever need this, but I'm going to take it down there anyway. So I got down there and found me a little room in the back of the Emergency Operations Center. It was one of the office areas that I'd stayed in when the other hurricanes were coming, laid it in there. So we got in to the meeting. MEMA came by, Robert Latham, he ended up being a dear friend, came by and said, hey, I know y'all been asked to leave, you don't have another place. We're going to be here for you on the back side, but there's not a whole lot we can do right now. So we're going to wish you well. We had a gentleman, some of you would remember, that I'd called before we got started and said, hey, we got to have somebody come down here and cook. And his name was Boss Hogg. Now, a lot of you would remember that. And I said, we need somebody to come down and cook. Luckily, we had the food pantry with all the supplies in the back. And we weren't going to waste that. So we had food going and had all the law enforcement people coming through. And we were just trying to at least, you know, all the restaurants had closed down. There was no place to get anything to eat at that time. So we were trying to provide for people there, and it became just a super busy place, the Emergency Operations Center. So the MEMA came by, sat and said, I know y'all have already been asked, you're going to stay. So we got into the meeting that night, started looking at what we could do to prepare, and there was not a whole lot we could do. And I remember we got finished with that meeting that night, probably about 8 o'clock. We were looking at some of the same things you were looking at, some of the same models. FEMA guy sat with me and said, pull up this slosh model and plug in FEMA slosh model, plug in New Orleans, and you'll see what's getting ready to happen here. So I remembered I was at a desk, had a group of the elected officials and others were out in front of me, and had a monitor, and I plugged it up, and I looked and I said, this is showing water is going to go all cover the entire county, all the way above the interstate, all the way up to the crossroads in Kill. One little place down here in Bay St. Louis, not going to show it underwater, Pecan Park. I didn't even know where it was then. I said, this can't be right. And he said, that's what you got coming. So here you are, you getting ready to be in trouble down here. I said, well, we're at 27-foot elevation. That's why we bought this building. We prepared for this. Survived Hurricane Camille. Didn't take on water. This thing's been here for many years. He said, you don't have enough. He said, you're looking at that much tidal flow plus the wave action on top of it. He said, you're in trouble here. Now keep in mind, we'd gotten us a grant a year or two before. We had built a safe room on the back of the Emergency Operations Center. And it was a 20 by 20 safe room, fortified brick walls. We'd had an air conditioner on it, had a generator on the outside of it. And we said, well, worst case, we got a safe room, we can go to the safe room. So sure enough, got finished with the meeting about 8 o'clock. FEMA came in and said, wish y'all well, we're gone. So I said, okay. All the MEMA people came in, wish you well, we're gone. Military came through, we wish you well, we're gone. So here we start looking around, and that's the first time I really second thought, we may be in trouble. So we said, well, we're here. So here it was, Sunday night, we've got all these boards up here. We've got one shelter in Hancock County now. It's the old Hancock North Central School, north end of the county. So we're keeping up with all the people in the shelter. So we're getting that call Sunday afternoon. We're full. We don't have a place where we can lay anybody else down. We can't take anybody else. We're going to have to turn them away. We'd received a call that afternoon late, and it came from a Mr. Griffith, Dan Griffith, Brian Griffith's brother. He said, we can't share this, but we're not turning anyone away at NASA. We're not an approved shelter, but if you run out of room and you can send people to either the North Gate or South Gate, we're not going to turn them away. So it put us in a terrible position because we had people calling and we were able to tell them, but I couldn't put it on the press release. I couldn't put it on the TV, couldn't put it on the radio. So a lot of people got upset with me because they found out later that we had other shelters and we didn't tell anybody. I said we were in a position we couldn't. I mean, they weren't an approved shelter, but they didn't turn anybody away. So that became the place with people that were calling this night was wearing on, go to NASA, go to NASA, go to NASA. So people had found out we were the Emergency Operations Center. A lot of people were trying to come in there, and we were trying to say, you got to get out of here. We don't have room. We're not a shelter here, and we're certainly just trying to function and get by. So we had a lot of people that we just had to basically run out of the Emergency Operations Center. Not a pleasant thing to be, not a pleasant place for us. So we rolled into Monday morning, woke up early, and here it was. One thing I failed to tell you rather than just being the county administrator, I was also the public information officer for the county. Some of you would remember probably in those days that I was doing a lot of the press releases and TV shows and radio shows. And so Monday morning, the calls were coming in, television stations, radio stations, and I was trying to give them some time. What's the situation? What are you dealing with? What are you planning to do? And the same story. We're dug in here, not a whole lot we can do. The law enforcement's been out overnight. Streets are flooded. We're basically tucked in here. Well, how are you faring? And I never will forget. I was on the air with WLOX, and they had my picture on the air, my voice, as I was talking to them. They said, how are you faring? How are you doing now? And I said, well, and it just so happened when I was in that interview, the roof lifted on the east side of the Emergency Operations Center. I said, well, the roof is lifting on the Emergency Operations Center as we speak. And they said, well, what are your plans? I said, we're going to the safe room. So little did I know that was the last word that got out to a lot of the people. Now, the word got out after that there were lots of deaths. Eddie Favre had passed away. It was even one got out to my brother-in-law that I swam out of the third story floor of the courthouse. The last time they saw me was swimming. So, and he'd go see my wife, and she didn't know whether I'd made it for days. I didn't make it home till Thursday after the hurricane. So my brother-in-law would go check on her. Have you heard from him? I haven't heard, but I think he's okay. Well, he had heard otherwise. So but anyway, it was those kind of things taking place. So last word they had is roof's lifted, we're going to the safe room. So that being the case, we all just tucked in, not even realizing how many people we had there. We started rounding people up. Come, y'all get on, come on in. So we had the conference room we were in. So we pulled them into the conference room. Water was coming up, everything that we were dealing with. Let's go to the safe room. So we rush out, get everybody in the safe room. Some people got their bed rolls. They're trying to get in there. And I said, we don't have room for all that. Yeah. Started looking around. We had 35 people in the Emergency Operations Center. Had no idea we had that many. Just a lot of thrill seekers, truthfully, that were there. So we got in the Emergency Operations Center safe room, got tucked in the back, had the air conditioning on, so we were going to be okay. And I remember walking to the side and started looking, and I started timing the water coming up the street. It was rising 1 foot every 5 minutes. I was timing it, so I went back to the Brian Adam, and I said, Hootie, we're going to be taking on water in here in 5 minutes. He said, how you know? I said, I'm watching it come up the street. So sure enough, 5 minutes, water started filling up that safe room that we were in. So we decided at that point, we got to get out of here, because we certainly, it was a brick fortified building. Doors about that far off the bottom of the door. So we got everybody, come on. So we go to the conference room. We get out there in the conference room. Phone lines, surprisingly, are still working. Somebody said, Tim got a call. So I picked it up, and it was the jailer right here at the courthouse. She said, I can't get in touch with anybody else. What do we do? water's waist deep in the jail and we got all the inmates locked up. I said, you got to get them out of that. So she said, the only thing we can do is get them upstairs. I said, get them upstairs. You got to get them out of the jail cell. Good thing they did. So found out later a lot of the people that were inmates got out and helped rescue people here around the courthouse as well. So that was the call that came in, the last one we had. So we gathered into the into the conference room, and we were all in there trying to decide, where do we go, what do we do? And I said, well, I know the highest part of this building is up front. A lot of you remember that building. It was a chain wall and it was built up. It was probably a good 3 or 4 feet up, higher in the front than it was in the back. So I said, and I know the highest part of the building is up here, so we need to head there. So someone said, before we leave, we need to get a record of who all is here. And so we were all in this room gathered around, and so we started counting 1, 2, 3, and so we were going through and we had someone that was writing it down. So we've still got that list. There were 35 of us now. Before we left, and I can remember we were there and everybody was getting ready to go, not knowing when when or if we were going to have to leave the Emergency Operations Center. And so somebody said, we need to find a way to identify ourselves. So here I was number 17. So with permanent markers, I wrote 17 on the back of my hand. So our plans were, if we had to leave the building, we were going to hang this up as high in the building as we could with our markers on our hands, so if we could be identified. So that's kind of the position we were in. So we went to the front of the building. Water was filling up, so we were gathering up the front of the building. And I always remember some of the ladies, and they were all there, but it got dead quiet. It got as quiet as this group now, other than me talking. Everybody was just sitting and watching. And I can remember watching the water coming in the side of that building, which would have been the west side. It was a big metal door, and water was running into that building. It seemed like forever that we were just there, and the water was running under the building. And I looked over at the building, and I just saw just the slightest glimmer of light. And I said, and I knew what that meant. I went to that door, and some of the ladies started, don't open the door. Don't open the door. So I opened the door and realized that the water had started to drop. Realized at that point we had been spared. And I turned and said, folks, we've been spared. So it was a sigh of relief for everybody there. So we ran to the front, got to the front of the building, and you'll remember, some of you, when I tell you this story, people at that point in time, the eye was coming in, and people that tried to stay, some of them jumped in their vehicles and tried to leave the building. So there were a couple guys, and they ran off into an area. Vehicle went underwater. They came swimming out of the vehicles, and we were able to get them out. And no sooner than we got them out was the family in the Suburban. A lot of you, if I had that picture, and I could show you that picture, you'd remember it. So there was an AP reporter that stayed there with us. Al Showers, the old WLOX reporter, was there with us. So Al videos it. The AP reporter's taking the pictures as they submerge, and the family comes crawling out, and his father and the mother, 2 teenagers, and at least 2 small children coming out of the building. So a lot of the people that were there with us grabbed life jackets and went across the median and got out there and started rescuing them. So a lot of the pictures that a lot of you have seen through the years was of that rescue that was taking place right there. We, and I'm going to try to be as fast as I can, but there's a lot of it I was wanting to cover. So, but the water receded, so Waveland Police Department had left, and we knew that they had stayed down at their police station, and we knew from the reports we were getting that area was devastated, not only with wind, but with water. So we had a gentleman by the name of Rick Fayard. We had a school bus at the Emergency Operations Center. He jumps in the school bus, heads down, and he was able to get that school bus up and get them off the building. If y'all would remember, the whole police department stayed on top of that building. So he was able to get them onto the school bus, into the school bus. So we're at the Emergency Operations Center, and he drives back in, and here's this whole police department in shock, freezing to death. They'd been in the water and on the roof all night. And the only thing that I thought I could do, I said, come on, to the guys, I got some clothes back here. So I went in and I handed out every stitch of clothes I had. So I had my clothes on my back, and I had no idea how long I was going to be there. But I handed the clothes out, and at least we were able to move them out. So had 2 guys from Iberia Parish that had come to ride out the storm with us. And I never will forget, they pulled in when they showed up there with an airboat on the trailer. And I thought, what in the world are they doing with an airboat? Well, I found out. So it moved on out, and the guys said, where do we need to go with this airboat? And I started trying to tell them. I said, come on, I'll go. So I jumped in, and we went down Highway 90, jumped across median, trees, power poles, went down, and we launched at 6:03 at Highway 90, and we started the process. So we started up. My plan was to go all the way to Central Avenue, because when I came down Sunday morning, that whole Highway 603 was lined with vehicles, and I knew that was not a good sign. That was telling me people were still living there. Phone calls coming in about sandbags. I knew that was telling us people were still there. So we started down there, and we couldn't get started good before we'd see people in the water, holding on logs, holding on pieces of buildings, holding on ice chests. And so we could get 4 small people, we could get 5 in the airboat at a time, and we made just a number of getting them out of the water, run them back up to the old Kmart, which is now the Harbor Freight parking lot. Had a school bus there, and we were putting them out. Had AMR there that was treating some of them. They were taking them to the library. I'm sorry, to the Hancock Bay High School, and so we continued that until it got black dark. And I remembered when it got black dark and we couldn't see any longer, didn't have any lights. We turned that airboat off, and you could hear people all across the water, help, hollering for help, and banging metal pads or whatever together, but it's nothing we could do. I mean, we were just to that point, we couldn't go any longer. Got back in that night. Immediately after we got back into the Emergency Operations Center, the Colonel Melton was over the military, the National Guard, Mississippi National Guard, called me and said, you need to come in here and sit with me. I came in, and he said, how bad was it? And I said, was not prepared for it. He said, how many body bags we're going to need? And I said, I hope I'm telling you wrong, but I said, we may need as many as 500, but I'm hoping 300. And I said, I don't have any way of guessing. I'm hoping I'm way off. I'm hoping I'm terribly wrong. He said, I'll order 300. If we need more, we'll get more. So he jumped on his satellite phone, and he got body bags started ordering. So that started the process. Now, here we were one of the few places where people were gathered. All the people that rode out the storm evidently knew that, probably from listening to the radio or watching TV, they started converging on the Emergency Operations Center. So it soon became a place where you couldn't walk around. I mean, you couldn't get in, much less get in and try to make decisions and have meetings. They were just, people were, I need to go check on my family. We got some of these missing, and it just was that crisis management is what we were dealing with, just trying to prepare and do for everybody that was there. So that they were coming in, and a lot of people were reporting people that were missing. So all we could do is just try to keep us a little list, where were they last, and start the process. So we realized then, after making the rounds, that we were down here completely surrounded with water. We had water all the way to the west, we had water to the north, of course we had the water to the east and to the south. So we were on the island, knew we had to just dig in and do what we could. So we just hung in there. Everybody that would show up, we'd try to just say, find your place. And there were people laying in every little place you could imagine. The carpet was wet, flooring was wet, mud was everywhere, but all we had to offer. So, and I remember Balsog was saying, hey, we got food for all these workers that are here, but I can't feed all these people. I said, feed them till we run out of food. We're going to have help coming eventually. I know we will. So he was around the clock cooking. I don't know how many meals he probably fed off that little 4-burner stove. But he stayed busy doing that. It rocked on till way up in the morning. I still remember well after midnight, and I finally said, I just can't go anymore. And I laid down, and no more than I laid down, someone came in and woke me up and said, hey, someone's here from the hospital. And I said, okay. We've had, they've taken on 4 or 6 feet of water at the hospital, had to move everybody upstairs, and they've had someone who's passed away. So the director has sent me to see you, to tell you, find out what you can do. And I said, the only thing I know, there was the manager at Mississippi Power, David Marfray, had come to me when he left. He said, we got an ice machine over there that's working. If y'all need it, it's there for you. And I said, the only thing I know to do is let's go get ice. So away we went, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, went over there. We had boxes and ice chests and bags, and we loaded up ice, sent them on up to the hospital, and they were able to at least go up there and get ice around the body that was at the hospital. But they were all on the second floor, no air. They were reporting that it was 100 degrees up there with all of them in that whole area. So they were able to at least get that done. We met that morning. That's when people started making their way down. The elected officials finally got clear and they started coming down. Bay St. Louis coming in, Waveland was coming in. We were all meeting and we got in, and the main thing that we were asking FEMA was, when can we get food, ice, and water? We got all these people that are here. They're starving, they're desperate. When can we get food and ice and water? And he said, I've already called. We'll have them tomorrow. Thank God, Gene Taylor, our congressman at that time, was there, and Gene said, I'm holding you to this now. Gene was still in office at that time, and he said, I'm holding you to this. We're getting ice, food, and water tomorrow. It'll be here tomorrow. I give you my word. He said, okay. So we felt like at least if we could hold off that day, so we just tried to provide everybody that came by us. And I told everybody, we were down to the point we were feeding fried wieners and sliced breads, all we could feed people. Vegetables we were heating up, any of the food that didn't get underwater in the food pantry, we were using it and just trying to provide for the people coming through. So we're just doing the best we can. Somebody came in and said, you need to come. They got Gene and Frank McNeil was police chief. We need to take you up in a Black Hawk helicopter. And I remember going behind at the old McDonald's ball field, got on Black Hawk helicopter. They lifted us up, and I remember flying over the courthouse and looking and realizing it at least stood. I don't know how bad it is. See some windows out, lots of shingles off. But I said, it at least stood. Now this building didn't look too good. This building was, a lot was down with it. But we hit the beach, started down the beach. I didn't recognize anything until we got to Buccaneer Park, and I recognized the water slide and said, know where we are. Next thing I recognized was the ice house at Bayou Caddy. We swung around, went across Port Bienville, looked at that and realized they fared pretty well at Port Bienville. Swung over to Stennis Space Center, they looked good, fine, and so the captain said, I got to get y'all back, I got a call, emergency, we got to go to New Orleans. So we aborted a mission, came back, got in. By that time, the Mississippi Highway Patrol, Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks, Mississippi Narcotics Bureau, all those law enforcement people showed up and said, we're here to help you with a rescue mission. So we're not going to get into a recovery mission yet. We're just doing rescue. I'll get into that. So we said, okay. And I remember, where do we start? Thank God. Here's Mickey Legas. Some of you will know him. And I said, Mickey, you take care of this. You direct everybody. That's who you're going to go to. So Mickey he was a local, had been here forever. He was able to lay out and say, I need you to go to this area. You go to this area. And people started going, making those rounds. So they would come back and report how many people that they had rescued. And if you remember, they were going into these houses. They were coming out, and they had these symbols they were putting on the houses, and they were coming out where they'd inspected it, didn't find anybody, and if they did find people in there and weren't able to recover their bodies, they had a little symbol that they'd use for that. They'd tell us what that symbol was. So they'd come back and tell how many they had rescued, how many they'd found where people had passed away, and we were able to get those locations and work with that. So luckily a lot of them had dogs, so they had really something that they were able to help. But we were overwhelmed with just people, everybody coming in. We were the only place that people could relate. They were coming in, and when I'm telling you, I'd find myself standing just for hours with people just saying, I got to have this, we need this, we need this. And it was just no way of managing other than just trying to take a note on it. But so we're going through all this, and lo and behold, here comes Mr. Edmund Fay, shows up and says, I got to have some help. I'm saying, we all need, what do you need? He said, I've got to have diesel and I've got to have embalming fluid. My morgue is getting filled up. We don't have any power. I don't have any way of keeping this going. So I said, I don't know about the embalming fluid. Hang on. I went to the military, Colonel Melton. I said, Colonel, can you help with diesel? He said, we can take care of the diesel. So he came over and was able to meet with Edmund, went over and started providing diesel to him. So Edmund would come back day after day, with a report. So so we finally got through that. We got his diesel over there, and by this time people were some people were recovering bodies and taking them in, but a lot of the people that were on these missions were doing that. So it rocked on. Wednesday the 31st, we had a meeting right off the bat in the meeting. We were in it. Gene Taylor was in the meeting. We had the elected officials. We had already established our points of distribution for all of our water, ice, food. Immediately, FEMA director reported the food and water and ice didn't make it. Gene Taylor reacted. He got up, and when I'm telling you, he got him by the collar and said, if that food and water and ice didn't make it here, I will have your job. And he had him so shook up. And so Eric Gentry came to me and said, hey, I don't know what happened. I'll find out. It was scheduled. The word had gotten out. They were staging everybody at Stennis Space Center, all the trucks, and then they were going to send them out to the counties that needed help. Just stage them where everybody could get food, water, and ice to get by. And I won't tell you what county, but one of our neighboring counties found out about it, sent deputies over there, commandeered the 18-wheelers, took them to their county, and they made distribution in their county. So that's what ended up happening. So found that out later, but I said, Gene, trust me on this. This guy's trying to help us. If you leave him alone, he'll help us. But I said, something's happened beyond him. And I said, we'll get to the bottom of it. So we were able to find out that that's what ended up happening. So that's the way the meeting started. So so we were continuing. Edmund came in that day, had reported that there were 20 bodies. He said, my morgue's filled up. We got them laid out on the ground. That's all I can do. I need something to cover them with because there's nothing else I can offer. And so we were going through that. We can get you some diesel. Where can we go from here? Thank God, Robert Latham and Bill Carlisle, he was a FEMA director for this whole area, came to the Emergency Operations Center and said, you need any help? And I said, do we? Let me tell you what we're dealing with. And I told him that story. I said, he's done everything he can. We're filled up. Where can we go? And they said, get the Highway Patrol to commandeer the first reefer that they can get and bring in here, and we're going to commandeer it. So there was a highway patrolman that was at the Emergency Operations Center. He said, I'll go. So he went, and while they were still there and we were trying to work through some other details, 18-wheeler came in, and I still remember. Here it pulled in, they were telling him where to go, and this guy was saying, what have I done wrong? I mean, I've come down here to try to help y'all, and you're getting ready to take my livelihood from me. And I can remember, the personal part came in where I said to them, they said, no, take it. You've got the authority to take it. And I said, we can't do this man. The man got a livelihood. He's from up in the Carolinas. And he said, can you get your hands on county checks? And I said, yes. Janelle, can you go to the courthouse, go to the safe, get the general fund checkbook, and get it back? So she came over, got the general fund checkbook, and the first check that we wrote after Hurricane Katrina was for Caves Trucking, $25,000. We bought that reefer for. I signed it. I got Robert Latham to sign it under me and Bill Carlisle. I said, because early on I didn't know how those things were going to go. So ended up moving it down to the Alcan cable, and that became the temporary morgue. So that kind of got us at least through that process. But those are some of the things that we were dealing with. We had a press conference that night. That's the first time we'd slowed down, and that's when people were starting to come in, and there were people that were just coming in and saying, I need to interview you, and all the locals were there saying, I got to have some help, we got to have it. And I told them, I'll be glad to interview you, but I can't walk off and leave all of them. And that's kind of where we were with this thing. So we finally set up a press conference where we were able to just get the word out, tell people where we were, able to establish then points of distribution for food, water, ice, where they needed to go, how they needed to register to get a travel trailer, those kind of things that we were dealing with. So we started getting reports about all the animals, and the one that really got in, and it was during the time that we were trying to commandeer the trailer. Someone came in and reported that they had seen a dog that had found a body, and they had come in to report to us. And I remember sharing that story with Robert Latham and Bill Carlisle, and they said, we got to do something. So that was part of the decision that was made to take Mr. Cave's trailer from him, but we did buy him a new one for $25,000. We put in a request that day for vehicles for Bay St. Louis, Waveland, and the county. We ended up getting 45 vehicles. We had airdrops lined up with the military to get food, water, and ice, so we were able to at least get that and start trying to provide for people. And I for the first time, Thursday, I looked up and thought, I haven't even been to the courthouse. I don't even know what we're dealing with over there. So I went to the courthouse, walked through there, and it was just, the building was still standing, but all of the records were just covered up. Ceilings had caved in, and I still remember realizing, thinking, I don't know how I can do all this and be able to do everything else we got to do. So I went back, met with the National Guard, Colonel Melton, said, Colonel, we got to have some help. He sent National Guard guys over here and started at least cleaning things up. And I said, if you could, get them to stand the books up and just start draining them. Now keep in mind, I realized the importance of people's deeds at that time, because if y'all remember, any of you that were here, you had to be able to provide some kind of proof that you lived where that slab was. And if you had your deed at your house and that nothing but a slab, you lost that deed. If you had another deed at the bank, then a safe deposit box, and it got flooded, you lost that deed. So the only chance you had were the deeds that were in the Chancery Clerk's office, that we were able to get you a certified copy where you could go to FEMA, Red Cross, whoever else you had to go to. So we knew the importance of that. So they stood the books up and started draining them. And at least that got us started. We were, I finally made it home that night for the first time. So I was, which would have been Thursday night, drove home late at night, turned around, came back that next morning. We got back in for the meetings the next morning, and all the reports were coming in from the people that had been out on the moving around. They were constantly trying to get looters away. They were finding people that were just, especially at night. They were going to all these places, and they were finding. I'll never forget. They brought a guy from Arkansas. You could just look like just a country gentleman came in, and he had found somebody's safe, and they found him trying to get back out of the county with that safe. But they brought him in to me and said, what do we do? And I said, if you can get his name, don't want him ever back in this county. Of course, there was so much going on then. I'm sure he drove up to the north end county and turned around and came right back in doing what he was doing. We had no way. I mean, it was lawless. Didn't have any law enforcement. But we got back in. Looting was such an issue. And at that time, the sheriff, at that time was Steve Garber, he had his own command center set up out there at the old, where now is Claiborne Hill. And they said, we got to get the sheriff in here to see this. So I rode out and met with the sheriff, and I said, hey, we need you to come to this Emergency Operations Center meeting. Well, we got our own things out here. I said, we got to have you. So anyway, I convinced him. He came back to that meeting that night, and it was able then to put a curfew in that night. Curfew went in on Friday, and it was from 10 at night till 6 in the morning. So we at least got a little reprieve with that. If you didn't have a badge, you couldn't be out after 10 o'clock at night. So many people, the Emergency Operations Center becomes just a pigsty. I mean, it was trash. I mean, it was just, as bad as I hate to say it, it was sewer. It was, everybody was dirty. People were trying to sleep on wet floors, and but it was a gathering place that everybody was. They had food there. And a lot of people, that's before any of the Christian groups came in and started feeding people. So people were coming in to eat, and a lot of them were trying to find a place to stay. So we'd just gotten to the point that we got to do something. So the decision was made for us to move. And so we went up, found places, went up to the Hancock High School now. We looked around, went up and found that place up there and decided we were going to move up there. So we came back and reported in that meeting on Friday night we were going to have to leave. Now, Bay St. Louis and Waveland didn't take too kindly to that. It felt like we were leaving them. We wouldn't have any other choice. I mean, we're to the point where we were saying, you can come up there and be a part of this, or if you got a place down here where we can set up an emergency operations center, then we'll do it. But we're looking at hundreds of people trying to gather on that little place there on Highway 90. You had military there, you had MEMA, you had FEMA, you had people from Florida that had come in, and thank God they had been through these hurricanes. They came in with an emergency support function system where they were able to help us organize. So they set it up with us and met with us and said, we need somebody to be over fuel, we need somebody over animal issues, somebody over debris, somebody over the utilities, and they had it broken out into 15 different organizations. We were able to appoint one person to do it. they said, but you don't have any place here, we can do this. So we finally moved, went up to the Hancock School. Bay St. Louis finally joined in with us. Waveland never did. They kind of broke away and went their own direction at that point. And so we got up there, had to get private security because we realized there's no way you can make decisions with people pulling on both shirt sleeves. I mean, you were just to that point. If you were there trying to make decisions, you needed some privacy. There was no privacy to be had until we got up there thinking if we can get up here. So FEMA said, you need to hire a private security company. Let them set up something out there screening everybody and not let them come through where y'all make your decisions. Well, not long, people realized there were side doors and back doors and all the other doors. So we were right in the same situation again. So we ended up there on that campus. Probably was 3,000 to 4,000 people that ended up there. I mean, it was just amazing to see that over the course of a few days. They ended up on the water tower with transmitters and antennas, and we had communication systems set up. Most of the military people were there, and I'll never will forget. I was so concerned about the courthouse, but there's no way I could have it do anything. And we were in the meeting, and we were sitting in a meeting, and I looked up, noticed someone on my side, and two of my deputy clerks had showed up. One of them's right here, there in El Scarbo, and said, "What can we do?" And I said, "You can go to the courthouse, and this becomes your project." So they came down and they started the process, which was a very useful, helpful project, because we were able to go in. Thad Cochran had announced not long after this took place that they were going to approve a $1.8 million grant, not a loan, it was a 100% grant for us to go in and scan all of our records, digitize them, make them available for the general public. So we went ahead, once we got that approved, and here we were already in September, and I remember looking at it and I said, October 17th, we're going to open it up to the general public. And they said, don't think we can do it. And I said, October 17th, we're going to make something available to people, because people are coming in seeing us and said, I need my deed. I can't go to my insurance company. I can't go. FEMA can't do anything. So October 17th, we set the date. They scanned records 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They at least got them up where they got them computerized, digitized. And on October 17th, we were able to open up, started handing people copies of their deeds. So that was certainly the first step that a lot of people saw in recovery that took place. But that was one of the major things that we had done. But we got in the meeting on Sunday morning, and I still remember Harrison County had come over and met with me, and they said they were going to discontinue their search and rescue on Friday. And we were in those meetings, and they were saying, how much longer do we want to carry this on? And I said, I just don't feel good about calling this thing off. And they said, it's approaching a week now, but we haven't found anybody in a couple of days. And I still remember Sunday morning we were talking, and they said, well, let's carry it out through this day. Well, that night they came in and reported they'd rescued 2 people from Waveland Sunday, 6 days later, out of a building that had collapsed. So I was certainly glad with that. But that day we got in a meeting up at the new facility. Reverend Jeffrey Reed was there, and I still remember he said, Tim, I think we need to slow down and have some devotion. I said, let's do it. So he gave such a touching devotion that morning. I still remembered it. And I was thinking, I said, we ought to incorporate this every day if we could, because it motivated everybody, gave everybody a little sense of hope. But he so much touched so many of us with that. But we were going through the process. Our big issues at that time, debris removal, camper trailers. And that became the big issues. The other big issue, animals. People were coming in, horses, cows, dogs, pigs, goats, sheep. They were just roaming wildly, and people were coming in, so we had to find a place. Started moving them up into the county where we were trying to get those located. And it was certainly an issue. It ended up having to find ranchers that would allow us to use our farms. And there was a $5 for small animals, dogs, cats, such as that, $10 for the larger animals. And you get caught up in all these other things, dealing with people and lives and rescue, and then forget about the dogs and the cats and the horses and such as that. And I never will forget, it rocked on. We were probably looking at October, November, somewhere there, that something came up about when we're going to resolve something on all the animals. And I thought, are they still going? Well, they were still going, and the clock was still ticking, and the dollar amount still adding up. So it ended up being some some really big expensive items. But again, it's one of those that's the way that happened. But we ended up with setting up points of distribution. Groups came in, Morale Group, International Aid Group came in. They were tremendous help. They were able to help us get things out to people, food, such as that. And I still remember it rocked on, and when I'd gone over to Harrison County to a press conference and got over there, and they were all telling about what they'd gone through. And as I rode over there, came off the interstate road, didn't even look like they'd had a hurricane. We went down to their courthouse in Gulfport. South of there now, you can see there'd been a hurricane, but north of there, it didn't even look like it was a hurricane. I'm thinking, goodness. So I remember they asked me to come and be a part of that, and they asked me to get up and speak. I said, I'm speaking to you on behalf of Ground Zero. Now, a lot of you, I know you've had your issues, but I can assure you what you're dealing with and what I've seen, it's nothing to what we're dealing with. And they'd had a Red Cross group that was there that was telling about how many people they had. And I'm sitting here looking around thinking, we've had one Red Cross worker. So I shared that information. Word got out, and within the next day they were calling wanting to know if I'd be on a national radio show and to be able to get the National Red Cross director on. So I said, certainly. So we got on, and that was one of those that I was not too pleasant. I was saying, here we are, Ground Zero, you're talking about all these hundreds of Red Cross people you got here providing services to all the people. We've got one person. And they said, that will change. Well, within a few days, we were over on Red Cross people, and that's when they set up these Red Cross tents where you could go in and you could get help. But hopefully that did some good. But we ended up, we recruited county workers, and it was kind of a trick because we couldn't get a lot of county workers to come back. It was just they were so caught up in their personal issues. And I said, the only way I know to get them back is to entice them with a paycheck, and we'll get Hancock Bank to come here. And John Baxter was with Hancock Bank. He agreed to come, and so we got the word out to all the county workers, come in, we're going to pay you. We used our last payroll check. I signed every one of them. John Baxter cashed them on the spot, and I said, all right, I need you in Emergency Operations Center to handle transportation. You need to be in the debris end of it. So we were able to start using a lot of those county workers in those roles. But it was hard to recruit some of them, but it was certainly one of those we had to do. We ended up with all our first docket checks. These people that had gotten in, a lot of people were coming in saying, I'm going to start cleaning up my area. I said, you can start cleaning it up, but don't come here looking to be paid on the backside unless we get approval. So a lot of them were saying, what can we do? And so I got with the MEMA and the FEMA people, and they said, we can pay people for doing cut and clear. So if they've got tractors with buckets, if they got track hose, bulldozer or anything like that, but we got to get a record of them. So a lot of people are coming in after the fact and say, I want to be paid for my work. They didn't come in and register with us, so we were having trouble getting those paid. So but they were coming in hoping to help. So people that were volunteering, they could do that, but the ones hoping to pay, if they didn't come in and register with somebody, we didn't have any authority to pay them. So, but that became a real issue as it rocked on. But this thing had rocked on. We were looking at Tuesday, September 6th, and I still remember being in the meeting that things are starting to slow down. We'd turned the debris removal over to Corps of Engineers. We had all the local people that were coming in saying, I can handle the debris removal. I can handle the debris removal. Had no idea we had so many experts in the county until that happened. But we had them. But we realized that if we did that, a lot of the burden was going to fall on the county. And whatever FEMA didn't approve to pay for, the county was going to have to absorb. And we're looking around thinking, our tax base is devastated right now. So the decision was made, and it was not a hard one, to turn it over to the Corps of Engineers. Now, we did that, and a lot of locals weren't pleased, but they were able, some of them were able to get on and be able to get a job. So, it rocked on now for days, but once we got set up with Emergency Operations Centers, people would come in, they needed a travel trailer, we were able to send them to that desk where they were filling out. People came in, needed food, water, and ice. Whatever they needed, we had these desks set up, we were sending them, and we were able to certainly get some help with that. And I remember the last night I report, this thing had rocked on. We were about 10 days into this thing now. I'd been home once or twice during that whole time. And my mother had been with my brother in Florida and hadn't seen any of them. I'd seen my family twice during that time. And my sister came in, we were in a meeting. She said, you got to come out. Mother's out in the parking lot. She's got to see you. She's getting ready to go back to Florida. So I said, I will when I get finished. So we made our way, got finished and went on out. So I was walking out there to see my mother, Dr. Kim Stastny. Some of you would remember her. She was superintendent of education. She was at the vehicle talking to my mother. And as I started getting close to the vehicle with my mother, I heard my mother say, "That's not my Tim." And I realized when I got closer that those 10 days must have taken a toll on me. And I said, "Mother, it is me." Oh my gosh. So anyway, that was kind of the eye-opener for me. And I realized that night that I said, I've got to slow this thing down, because it was just a nonstop. It was an 18 and 20 hour a day every day. And I can remember that evening that the guy had come by and he said, "Hey, we rigged up a generator at the county barn to the water heater. If you want to go by there, you can get you a hot bath, shower." And I still remember thinking, I couldn't wait to get there. So I left after my mother had left, went by there, pulled in that county barn, made my way back in there, had my little flashlight, crawled back in there and took that hot shower, went home for the first night, crawled in my bed and slept like a baby. So anyway, it was just quite a journey. I had a whole lot more. I was trying to condense this, and I probably went too long. I understand that. So thank y'all for bearing with me, but I was just trying to share with you some of the things that were being dealt with on the public entity, public servant level, in addition to the personal issues we had. Now, thankfully, and a lot of you will know I live way up in the county, people would come by and say, "How did you fare in the hurricane?" And I said, what I ended up losing on my house was less than a lot of people ended up with down in the worst areas. And that's basically the way it was. So we still had our house, of course, stayed out without power forever, like everybody else did. But overall, we fared well personally. Yes, sir.
You alluded earlier that when Florida came in, you indicated they sort of had their act together.
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness.
My question is, has the county gotten their act together?
We, and surprisingly, I'd been at some of the hurricane conferences before then. That had never been discussed in any of the hurricane conferences I'd been in. But since then, Mississippi, especially the coastal counties, have almost all adopted and become familiar with the emergency support function operation. Because I can tell you, they break it down to where it's organized, where it's, instead of, it's organized chaos, but it's organized, where people can come in and at least you know where to send them. So, but I'm sharing this story, and I know I did a lot of but it was my story. And a lot of the other people's got these same stories, but those are some of the issues and some of the things that we work through to try to get back where we are. And I'm thankful when I walk out and go around this county to see that some of the right decisions were made, obviously, because we have really rebounded here. Very thankful to be a part of it.